Welcome. Today we're going to be looking at figurative language, and like we do with most of our lessons, let's start with analyzing and defining some of the key terms. So what we're going to begin with is I want you to, in groups or in your pairs, to define the following three terms. The first is literal. Get my pen. First is literal, the second is figurative, and the third is metaphorical. So I'm going to give you 1 minute to spend doing on that. Okay, so let's have a look at those terms. The first is literal. So what does literal mean? Literal really is when words are used for their direct meaning. There are no metaphors, there are no figures of speech, so the word is the word. Figurative, on the other hand, is where words are used for other meanings. So we use a lot of figurative language when we write poems, often when we give speeches. Sometimes political activists use it to persuade their audience. So figurative language includes figures of speech, which we are going to be looking at. And then metaphorical. Metaphorical again is figurative language, particularly when we use metaphors. And we're going to look at that in a little bit more detail. So let's see how this lesson is going to proceed. All right. We have the idea of figurative language. And this is a nice definition that we can begin with. So what is it? Figurative language is language that uses figures of speech, okay, to make a point, or to make what you say or what you write more interesting, more impactful, or more persuasive. Okay, so often used in advertising and in politics. So what are figures of speech? Figures of speech are words or phrases that don't have their normal, everyday, literal meaning. And there we've got the word literal again. And sometimes figures of speech are more dramatic and powerful than literal language, which simply states the facts. So which figures of speech are we going to focus on today? We're going to focus on idioms, and we're going to focus on similes, and we are going to focus on metaphors. Okay, so let's begin. Let's begin with idioms. All right, so this is going to be an activity, and what I want you to do is you're going to have the opportunity to select A, B, C, or D. And it's a conversation. So I'll quickly take you through the conversation. And in each statement, there is an idiom that's used, and you need to identify the correct answer for that idiom. So this is how the conversation goes. 1. You want to know why I've got a bee in my bonnet, and can you see that I've bolded the idiom, so that'll help you. Want to know why I've got a bee in my bonnet? Then the person replies, yes, tell me about it. I'm all ears. Then it goes back to our first speaker. You remember I told you about that car that cost me an arm and a leg? The one you bought from the man you called a big cheese? Can you see how this conversation is working? And the person replies, well, he's not that at all. He's a bird brain. You mean he's a bad egg? Yes, and lazy. When I went to speak to him in his office, he was having a catnip. Okay, there's our idiom there, catnip. All right, so that's a conversation. And I'll do the first one for you, the first part of the conversation. And then I'm going to leave you to do the rest. Okay, there we go. So, first of all, you want to know why I've got a bee in my bonnet. Now, you need to select, what does a bee in my bonnet mean? Does it mean A, I've got a headache, B, I've got a fly in my head, C, a problem on my mind, or D, a difficulty with my hair? Okay, so the answer is obviously C. All right, and that you're going to select. So now for the rest, I'm just going to take you through, I'm going to give you about a minute, and you'll see each part of this conversation. I'll give you about 10 seconds for each. And then in your groups or in your pairs, select the correct answer. Is it A, B, C, or D? All right, so let's start. I'm going to move on to the first part of the conversation that you're going to be analyzing on your own. Okay, and I'll give you a minute from now. Okay, welcome back. Let's have a look at how you did. I'm going to go back to the first part of the conversation, right at the beginning. Okay, so we decided that I've got to be in my bonnet is an idiom, and it means that I have a problem on my mind. Then, what did you select for the next? It's, yes, tell me about it. I'm all ears. All right, so it's listening carefully, listening quietly, listening quickly, or listening completely. And I'm thinking it could in fact be both A and D. Listening very carefully, I'm all ears, all right, and I'm listening completely. Okay. All right, so it could actually be A and D. So I'm all ears doesn't literally mean I've got ears everywhere. It means that I'm absolutely paying attention to what you're saying. Okay. Then the next one is, you remember I told you about the car that cost me an arm and a leg? Okay, so I don't know if you've heard that idiom before. What does it mean? It means it cost me a huge amount of money. So that D would be the correct answer for that. And then the next one is, the one you bought from the man you called the big cheese. All right, so what does big cheese mean? Does it mean the man with the big ears, or with the important job, with the yellow teeth, or with the big smile? It's B, the man with the important job. Okay. And then the next one, well, he's not that at all. He's a bird brain. Okay. So what does bird brain mean? Is a fool, a criminal, a con man, or a devil? Okay, so bird brain is A. It means he's a fool. All right. And then the other person replies, you mean he's a bad egg? And what is the different options that we have with that? Is he disgusting? Is he dirty? Is he stupid? Is he dishonest? And the correct answer for that is that he's dishonest. Okay, so he's a bad egg, he's dishonest. And then the last part of that conversation is, yes, and lazy. When I went to speak to him in his office, he was having a cat nap. So what does cat nap mean? And I suppose you can imagine it if you think of a cat having a quick nap. Is it a deep sleep, a long sleep, a short sleep, a big sleep? So a short sleep. Okay. So that would be the answer for there. All right, so that's a conversation where many idioms are used. We don't really speak like that a lot. But you do have to be familiar with the language to understand idioms, which is why sometimes it's a bit difficult for, let's say, if we're using English idioms, it's difficult for somebody whose language is not, English is not their mother tongue, so it might be hard for them to understand. Similarly, if I were to speak another language, it would be difficult for me to understand the idioms used in that language. So let's have a look. What we have, okay, and I've just said to you, it's very difficult to understand if you're not native to that language. So we looked at I have a bee in my bonnet, we looked at I'm all ears, we looked at it cost me an arm and a leg, and we spoke about how we have to be familiar with the language. Okay, so if you weren't familiar with English, and if you hadn't heard these idioms before, what might you think I was talking about if I used them? Well, let's have a look here. Okay, so a bee in one's bonnet. Literally, this is what it looks like. Okay, so I've got a bee in my bonnet. This is the bonnet, this is the bee. Okay, but we're not meant to use it literally. Okay, and this gives a nice explanation how this idiom works. Okay, so a bee in one's bonnet. A bonnet is a type of hat that was used in older times. Obviously, having a bee in one's bonnet or bee in one's hat is not a comfortable experience. So, someone with a bee in one's bonnet is constantly distracted by something, usually a thought of some kind or another. Okay, so you've got this urgent thought that you're thinking about or focusing on. And then, similarly, if I were to say to you, I'm all ears, if you're not familiar with that idiom, you might think, what do you mean literally? And perhaps this vision might come into your mind. I'm all ears, I would be full of actual ears. But in fact, I use that term idiomatically, which means, like we said, I'm absolutely listening to everything that you said. And then finally, if I say to you, it cost me an arm and a leg, all right, a literal interpretation of that would be, I give you my arm and I give you my leg and I buy whatever I need to buy. All right, so that costs a lot, okay? Those are parts of your body. So this would be a literal interpretation of that idiom, okay? Where in fact what we mean when we say it cost me an arm and a leg is that we mean it's just very, very expensive. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to go to an ad break, and when we come back, we're going to have a look at metaphors and similes. I'll see you back in a minute. Okay, welcome back. Let's go on to our next figure of speech. We are going to be looking at similes. So, what is a simile? A simile is when we compare two things. And when we compare them, we use the words like or as. Okay, so if I say to you, he is as tall as a house, that's a simile. I'm comparing two things. I'm comparing his height and I'm comparing the height of a building. Or if I say to you, she is like an angel. Okay, I'm comparing perhaps the girl's or the woman's beauty or her personality with the personality of an angel. I'm saying she's angelic. So both of those are examples of a simile. All right, so let's have a look at an exercise that we can do together. Here I have a table, okay, and I've got 4 similes. He is as fat as a pig. So we know that's a simile. We can identify that as a simile because we have the word as. And then the second one, she is as light as a feather. Again, we know that's a simile because we have as and we have as. And then the third, Our third simile, she runs like the wind. We know that's a simile because we can identify the word like. And she is as slow as a snail. There we have as and as. Okay, now what I'm going to ask you to do in your groups is I'm going to ask you to discuss each of these similes and identify what are their literal meanings and what are their figurative meanings. So when I say literal meanings, I mean, what do the words actually say? All right, don't think past the words. So if you have the word pig, what does that mean? Then in terms of the figurative meaning is, what is this person, let's say I'm saying that he is as fat as a pig. What am I trying to say? All right, because I am using a simile, I am using figurative language. So while you're doing that, what I want you to also think about is that, remember, a simile is a comparison. Okay, we're comparing two things. So in the first, he is as fat as a pig. We are comparing his weight, I'm sure. Okay, this pen writes quite slowly. Comparing his weight with that of a pig's. Okay, in the second, what are we comparing? We're comparing the girl or the lady's weight with that of a feather. Okay, so we've got the two things that we're comparing. He runs like the wind. I would imagine that we're comparing his speed, how quickly he runs, with how quickly the wind blows. And in the last one, we're comparing her speed, again, but this time with how slowly a snail moves. All right, so in each of them we have that comparison. Okay, I'm going to give you 3 minutes this time to complete the exercise, and I want you to look very carefully at each of them. You've got 4 to look at, and discuss what is the literal meaning, okay, and what is the figurative meaning. And I'll see you back in 3 minutes, and then we'll work through the answers together. All right, so let's look at this table together. We have our 4 similes. Okay, just going to see if they'll all fit onto the screen. Well, let's first look at the first 3. All right, so what is the literal meaning of the first simile, he is as fat as a pig? Okay, so if you take the words for the words, you can imagine you have your little pig. And you've got a curly tail, his ears, whatever. Okay, so what you're saying literally is that if you're comparing the man, that is his exact weight. Okay, now that doesn't often happen, we hope. So what is the figurative meaning? So if I say to you, and it's quite a rude thing to say about somebody, but anyhow, we're learning, he is as fat as a pig. What am I saying figuratively? I'm just saying he's very fat. Okay, very fat. And I'm using a nice descriptive way, very fat, using a descriptive way to get my message across. Okay, so it's quite powerful. I'm definitely emphasizing his weight. Then the next one, she is as light as a feather. Remember, as soon as you're asked to look for a simile, look out for as and look out for like. Okay, so she is as light as a feather. Literally, okay, you have your feather. Okay, all right. Now, you can't be as light as a feather. Okay, so then we know immediately, okay, so we're using these words, we're using them figuratively. And what are we saying by using that simile? We're saying that she's very, very light. Okay, so again, I'm emphasizing, okay, the fact that she's light. And then the third one, all right, she runs like the wind. All right, how quickly does the wind move? All right, it moves quickly. All right, can somebody run as quickly as the wind? No, they can't. Literally, you cannot run as quickly as the wind. So what am I doing? I'm using these words figuratively. All right, and what I'm saying is she runs incredibly quickly. Okay, and it's quite a beautiful description. If you think about the movement of the wind and you think of the speed of the wind and you imagine she runs so quickly, it's almost like she runs as quickly as the wind. And then finally, we have our last. We have she is as slow as a snail. Okay, and then we literally, can anybody move as slowly as a snail? Nope, they can't. Only a snail can. So what are we saying? Talking figuratively, we're saying she moves incredibly slowly. And again, there's that emphasis. And there's that imagery as well, which is quite powerful. So there we have it. There we have. We've learned how to identify similes, and we're looking for as, and we're looking for like. Okay. Now, how does that work in a poem? Because often you are going to be asked to look at figurative language in the context of a poem. And you have your as-like glasses on, so you're scanning for them when you read a poem if you're asked to look for a simile. And this is quite a pretty poem, and it is called Flint. Okay, and a flint is a piece of rock, often used to make fire, and it's by Christina Rossetti. And she writes, an emerald is as green as grass. Okay, an emerald is a green stone. A ruby red as blood. A sapphire shines as blue as heaven. A flint lies in the mud. Then we move to the next stanza. A diamond is a brilliant stone to catch the world's desire. An opal holds a fiery spark, but a flint holds fire. Okay, so what is she saying? I'm going to ask you to look at the similes, but I just want to give you an overview of the poem. We have her describing these beautiful stones, green, emerald, beautiful ruby, sapphires, diamonds, and she's saying that these are externally beautiful, and she uses similes to describe that. But then she focuses on the flint. And in the fourth line of this first stanza, she says, a flint lies in mud. All right, so she doesn't use a simile to describe the flint. She's saying that it's not beautiful externally. Okay, it's not green, it's not red, it's not blue, it's not as valuable as a diamond, seems to be on the outside. And there we find it, and it's lying in the mud. And then she goes to the next stanza, and she says She speaks about a diamond, okay, and desire, and an opal, which is a stone made of many different beautiful colors. And she talks about the spark and the brilliance of these. But she says, why is a flint so important? Because in fact, what it does is it holds the fire. All right, so that's a very important part of this line is a very important part of the poem, because what she says is externally, yes, everything is beautiful, but in essence, what is important, what is very meaningful, all right, and that is what counts. So what I want you to do, and this is often how the questions are phrased in your exams or tests. So they'll say, identify the simile or identify two similes and discuss why they are effective. Okay, so I'm going to get you to do that. I want you to identify two similes and discuss together why they are effective. So I'm going to go back and just give you a quick indication of where you're probably going to be looking. I want you to focus on the first stanza, all right, and identify an effective. Remember, when you're talking about effective, you're going to say, why do they work? Why are they powerful? Why has the poet used them? All right, so I'm going to give you 2 minutes for that, and then I'm going to come back and take you through that quickly, and then we're going to go for another ad break. Okay, I'll see you back in 2 minutes. Okay, let's look at our poem. You've been asked in your test or exam to identify two similes and explain their effectiveness. So I pointed you to the first stanza, and there we have, and remember you've got your as-like glasses on when you're looking for similes. The first, an emerald is as green as grass, so you could have identified that one. A ruby, red as blood, there's a second one. A sapphire shines as blue as heaven, there's your third. And the poet doesn't use a simile in the fourth line. Okay, so first say, all right, one. If you're answering the question, think carefully about the message you want to give to the reader, okay, or the teacher who's marking. You would phrase your answer something like this. In Christina Rossetti's poem, she uses the simile as emerald is as green as grass. Okay, so one, you've identified the simile. Now that's important, so you will get a tick for that. Then the second part, remember you haven't fully answered the question because the questions also ask you to explain why it is effective. Okay, so the second part of the question, perhaps you discussed something like this. It's effective because grass is a deep green color, and therefore it highlights how beautiful and green emerald is. You could have said something like that. But again, your answers will differ. Your answers will differ, but what's important is that you always justify them, okay, and always substantiate them by going back to the text. The second simile that we identified, you could have answered in Christina Rossetti's poem, she uses the simile, ruby is as red as blood. Full stop. You get a tick. This is effective because blood is a powerfully red color, which therefore emphasizes is quite a good word to use, all right, which emphasizes how beautifully red the ruby stone is. Okay, you could have said something like that. And there you'll probably, the mark allocation for those type of questions are going to be 2 or 3 marks. And then finally, the last simile that you could have identified was sapphire shines as blue as heaven. All right, and there you've got your as, and you would say the simile is a sapphire shines as blue as heaven. Remember to use your quotation marks, and then you would say it is effective because heaven is a beautiful blue color, and thus you can use the word emphasizes again, emphasize the shine and the beauty of the stone. Okay, so think about how you answer your question, and again, often be guided by the marks that are allocated. We're going to go to an ad break, and then we're going to continue the next part with looking at metaphors. Okay, so welcome back. We're into our last section, and in this section we're going to look at metaphors. So what is a metaphor? A metaphor, again, is a comparison, like a simile, but this time it's a direct comparison of 2 things. So instead of using the word as or like we do with similes, we don't use as and like, we use the direct comparison. So instead of my saying, she runs like the wind, all right, I will say, she is the wind. Okay, so I'm not using as or like. And that's why sometimes I say metaphors are more powerful than similes, because there's not the as or like, there's that direct comparison which really gives the image to the reader. So let's start with another exercise. And here we have a table, and what I want you to do in your groups is this. We have our similes. These are the similes that we worked on in the previous section. He is as fat as a pig. She is as light as a feather. He runs like the wind. She is as slow as a snail. What I want you to do is change these similes into metaphors, okay, and then discuss their figurative meaning. All right, and I'm going to do the first example for you. So the simile is, he is as fat as a pig. Now, a metaphor, I also want to continue that comparison between his weight and the pig's, but I need to take out the as. So I change it to, he is, there's that word, a pig. All right. And what does that mean? Well, I suppose if I'm using it as a metaphor, I don't necessarily know that the comparison is about a weight. I could be talking about the weight, say that he's overweight, but I could also be talking about his manners, saying he has bad manners. All right, but that will obviously depend on the context in which you use that metaphor. So this is what you're going to do. I'm going to give you 3 minutes, and you are going to change the last 3 similes. She is as light as a feather, he runs like the wind, and she is as slow as a snail. You're going to change them into metaphors. Remember, you need to get rid of the as, and you need to get rid of the like. Okay, and then what I want you to do in your groups or in your pairs, I want you to discuss what is the figurative meaning of each of these. So I'll see you back in 3 minutes. Okay, welcome back. Let's have a look at what you worked with in this table. So we had first, he is as fat as a pig, and we chatted through that one, and we said the metaphor would be he is a pig. All right. So what did you say for the second one? She is as light as a feather. You need to get rid of the as's, and there you could say she is a feather. She is a feather. Right. That would be your metaphor. And what is the figurative meaning? Again, you could say, well, she's very, very light. You might even say something like she moves very beautifully, very elegantly. It depends on the context. Remember, always read around the simile or around the metaphor, particularly in a poem. He runs like the wind. All right. You could say he is the wind, which is a very beautiful image. He is the wind. And there, what we could say, he runs quickly, he runs fluently, he runs beautifully, anything like that could be your interpretation of that. And then finally, the last one is, she is as slow as a snail. You would change that to make it a metaphor. You would say, she is a snail. She is a snail. Okay. Sometimes metaphors are a little bit more difficult to identify than similes, because similes, if we see an as or a like, then it's, okay, that's a simile. Whereas when there's a metaphor, there's not always that alert. So if you are asked to look for a simile, say to yourself when you're looking, I'm looking for a comparison, and I'm looking for a comparison that is not literal. Okay, so if I look and I read, she is a snail, then I know, okay, that's not a literal. I don't want to use those words literally. I need to understand them figuratively. So there you have, all right, I've identified my metaphor. And what is the metaphor saying to me? Well, it's saying she moves very slowly. Okay, so that's a little tip if you're ever asked to look for metaphors, which you will be. And we move on then to our next activity. Okay, and I'm going to give you 3 minutes for this one. And in your groups or in your pairs, I want you to read through this little extract, okay, and it's about a haircut. And when you're reading through, I want you to identify as many metaphors as you can. Remember, metaphor is a direct comparison, no as, no like. So this is the extract, the haircut. When I woke up on Saturday, my sister said I was a sheepdog with my long, untidy hair, and it was time for me to get my hair cut. She was right. My hair had to be cut. The barber's chair was a tower which grew right close to the curb on the pavement where we sat. I wasn't nervous because I was an explorer, looking at the world in a whole new way. The pieces of hair on the pavement were a mossy carpet of strange black fibers that crisscrossed in a crazy pattern. The pavement was an odd new planet. I was the astronaut looking down from above, and the barber was the leader of the expedition. So that's our extract. In your pairs or in your groups, work together, read through this carefully, and identify as many metaphors as you can. I'll see you back in 3 minutes. All right, let's have a look at our extract, the haircut. I'm going to underline the metaphors that I've identified and check with me, check against my answers what you got. So, the haircut. When I woke up on Saturday, my sister said I was a sheepdog. There we go. Right, not I was like a sheepdog or I looked like a sheepdog. I was a sheepdog with my long untidy hair. And it was time for me to get my hair cut. She was right, my hair had to be cut. The barber's chair was a tower. There we go. The barber's chair was a tower, which grew right close to the curb on the pavement where we sat. I wasn't nervous because I was an explorer. Okay, and can you see, you're looking at the is and was. All right, these are the clues for when we're using metaphors. I was an explorer looking at a world in a whole new way. The pieces of hair on the pavement were a mossy carpet. There we have another one. Of strange black fibers that crisscrossed in a crazy pattern. The pavement was an odd new planet. I was an astronaut. A simile would be I was like an astronaut or I felt like an astronaut. I was an astronaut looking down from above, and the barber was the leader of the expedition. All right, so there are our metaphors in that passage. Let's have a look. Now, a question again that you might be asked. We're not going to go through this, but I just want to give you an example of what you're going to have or what you may have in your test and exam. It would say, be phrased like, and very similar to the simile question, choose one metaphor from the passage, the haircut, and explain why you think it is effective. Okay, remember, you've got two parts to the question. Choose one, so you need to identify it. And then the second is you need to explain its effectiveness. Okay, so there you would have your extract, you would go through it, you would identify, and then you would expand on that. So, I want to finish off by saying that we've looked at idioms, we've looked at similes, we've looked at metaphors, but there are many, many other figurative examples of figurative language or figures of speech. Okay, we've got hyperbole, exaggeration. I say to you, I've told you 1,000 times. That's hyperbole. We have personification, okay, and that's giving inanimate objects human-like qualities. So an example would be, when I sat on the chair, it screamed in agony. Okay, chairs don't scream, people scream. We have oxymoron. An oxymoron is when we put two opposites together. So it would be examples like beautiful pain, bittersweet, a silent scream. And often sound devices are referred to as figures of speech, which technically they're not really, but they are included in that list. So our sound devices, we have the examples of alliteration, okay, which is the repetition of a consonant. Please park your Porsche. We have assonance, okay, which is the repetition of vowel sounds. The rain in Spain. And we also have onomatopoeia, okay, which are words that imitate the sounds which are described. So drip, you can imagine a tap dripping. Hiss, the sound of a snake, or knock, the sound of somebody knocking at the door. So these are examples that you probably have come across and that you will be coming across. And it's important that you appreciate them for what they do for a language. Okay, they make a language more powerful, they make it more persuasive, etc., etc. All right, so that's that for today. It's been wonderful working with you, and I look forward to seeing you in our next lesson.